So welcome back to my channel. Thanks again for joining me. Today I've removed my computer and I've put I've put a lot of my comic artwork on the desk here, and I just want to go through it with you guys. I think I've done a little bit of this, but I've only touched the surface. So I just want to show you what I've been working on over the past, 30 years. almost 40 years since I was in my 20s. So 57, so about 35 years at least. And I just want to show you a few of the projects that I've been working on and just explain a bit of my thinking and my story creation and my process. It may be of some interest to you guys, and also this is what I started with before I got into animation, so it's a bit of a conduit to where I am today. So let me just turn the camera around and I will just walk you through some of these stories that I've got here. Okay, so my inspiration when I was a kid was Tintin. I would almost said Asterix and Obelix, but that was very big. And there was Tintin, and I found you're either a Tintin person or an Asterix and Obelix person. I was definitely a Tintin person, and so I grew up with these. And I've done a video separate to this, going through quite a few of these Tintin books. But really, Herge, let me just stand up here. No, I don't think we need to go through this again, but I've got basically all his books plus all his Tintins plus a few more. He did a few more things. He didn't only do Tintin, but they're all in there. And when I was a kid, this was my thing. I really loved it. So that and I've shown this as well, but that made me create my own books. And I've been through this also in a separate video, but I honestly can't remember. Unfortunately, I have no date here. But I can't remember how old I was when I did this. But I'm thinking by the writing, maybe 8, 7, 8, maybe 9, but not older than 10, definitely not. And I created these comics basically just inspired by Tintin. And a lot of the stories are very Tintin-esque. They don't go too far away from some of the Tintin adventures. So there's the one, James and the guy's called James. I mean, how narcissistic was I? In India, in Africa, James and the super submarine. So those were, and a nice coffee stain. So those were my first endeavors, my first tries goes at comics. Then many years went by. And when I was in the 20s, I started getting a little bit more serious, and this is what I want to show you guys. So my process here, this is A3. You'd call this I think this is A2. This is A2 size. If I just zoom out, you can see how big it is. I'll just put a coffee mug there, and you can see how big these are. So I was doing oversized original artwork for these comics. These were all penciled first. I've got all the originals in pencil version, and then this is what I used to do in these first couple. I painted with gouache. This is way before digital. This is going back to probably the 80s, the late 80s, and I would painstakingly separate the overlay, the black overlay, and just paint the color. So on top of this would come the black line work and all the text for all the bubbles. So this is one of my adventures, and it's all in gouache. So yeah, I vaguely recall what the story was. I've got it in its entirety somewhere, or in one of my files, and I started doing this. So this was one of my first attempts, And heck, I must have been in my early 20s when I did this. I got so far, and with all the best of intentions for going further. But what I did, what was interesting looking at it now, is here is my first attempt, and then I went to gouache. So it's the same frames, it's the same page. You see, it's basically the same. And this was on watercolor, and this was all watercolored, and I hadn't separated the blacks from the color here. You can see here I haven't got any of the separation done. So this actually came before this, and then I read some books about color separation. As I say, this is way before digital, and I'd read that this is the way Herge had done Tintin as well. He had separated the color from the black and white line. So this was my first attempt, and then I went to this method, gouache, and it's on very good, it's almost board. It's very, very thick watercolor paper. So that was the progression there. And then all my original stories are all in files like this. I've got all my stories, photocopies, pencils, whatever, they're all in here. Right, so that's the beginning. That honestly was early 20s, and then I moved on. Let me just shift some of these Tintins out the way here. So I'm not throwing them on the floor, I'm just placing them gently on my seat here. Then there was another couple of adventures. This one I gave up on the gouache and I went straight to watercolor and kept all the black line on it. I think by now I'd figured out that you could do color separation later. I think technology had maybe moved on, or I just changed my method. So this is a totally different adventure, and it's all in watercolor. Again, this would be it looks like just over A2. Just over A3. I don't know if it's quite A2, but this is a totally different adventure. Again, a lot of Tintin influence here. These guys are in Africa somewhere and getting up to mischief. And yeah, I've got all the pencil work for this. Everything's separate in folders in that file I showed you. Yeah, so this actually got pretty advanced. This one I think I finished, but I didn't quite finish the color work. That one also finished, but when you say finished, they were all finished in pencil work, and it was just a matter of taking them to final artwork. So this goes on. I took these to publishers, all of them, and it was very, very hard to get published, so they never went anywhere, and I'm sitting on them, and they never will go anywhere unless I create some animated content out of them or turn them into an animation. Okay, this one you can see I got as far as this, and that's as far as I got with the coloring on this. Okay, so I showed you my little finger there. And then this was the photocopy of just the line work. So it'd be pencil, then I'd ink it, then I'd take it over into, well, I'd ink on the watercolor, and then I'd paint, add color there. And then this is just an idea of the actual size. So that's A4. So yeah, this would have been, well, this is A2, and the original artwork is bigger than A2. So yeah, it's almost between A3, sorry, this is A3, and the original artwork would be almost A2. And that would be the finished, where's the pencil for reference? That would be the finished artwork there. Well, no, when it's printed. So if you compare it, I'm waffling a little bit on size here, but there's a Tintin there, and there's a finished one, so I even reduced more. So my thinking was to scale up on the originals and do all the artwork, all the color, etc., at a much higher size, and then reduce. That seemed to be the way that Herge had done it. I'd worked out, and that's the way I was working. So that was my second adventure, totally separate from that. This one, okay, this was a later one. This was, again, this is a fully finished story on its own. I've just covered the name there because this is one I actually do want to finish, and I actually am in touch with a publisher that's interested in this one. Now this one, my method was totally different. I didn't do anything in watercolor or in gouache. This one I used ink pens, markers, alcohol-based markers. I think that they were, well, the brand was Pantone markers, but there's other brands now. And what I'd do is I would draw the original at a bigger size, at A3. This is inked, and then that's the original there. Sorry, that's the original inked colored version there. So I would reduce this to A4 and then go and ink it, or not ink it, color it in A4, and then 2 A4s. That would make one page. So this would be reduced again to get it down to that. So you can see again, I was still working at scale. And this, as I say, this one's still, I think, viable for to get published. And as I say, there is one publisher that I'm talking with that I want to get. It needs a lot of changes. And the changes that I'm doing, another thing that so here's all the artwork here. Let me just change hands. Here's all the original artwork here, all the pencils. Yeah, quite rough, but the whole story's been penciled, and quite a lot of work's gone into this. In fact, a lot of work goes into all of this, but that's sometimes not enough. You know, you can create, but getting it out there and getting it published, unless you self-publish, that's very viable these days, and I might go that route. But still, there's so much work to be done on each project. The other thing that I just wanted to mention was what's changed is there's a lot of actual violence. This is weird to say, but there's a lot of violence in a lot of these comics. And when I say violence, punch-ups, guys getting punched and stuff, and guns. And that comes from Tintin as well, where, you know, a gun and shooting and cops and robbers type thing was the thing back in the day. And I know there's a lot of comics and manga and stuff that are very violent, but I must say, I wouldn't call myself a pacifist, but I don't see the point of just gratuitous violence in media. If I'm watching a movie and it gets violent, it turns me off. So this, whoops, a little bit of a blur there. These old stories here are there's a lot of violence in them. And if it's not open violence, it's implied. So, for instance, here, this guy with a machine gun, rat-tat-tat, and so on and so on. So, if they're not shooting at each other, there are guns, and there's a lot of guys getting hit over the head, etc. This early version here, you can see there were guys with machine guns. And when I was doing this, my dad actually pointed at my father, who was in the military, in the police, and had seen a lot of violence. He'd been in a lot of action. And if you hear some barking in the background, that's my dog, one of my dogs. But he actually pointed it out to me. I was in my 20s and I was busy doing this. Whoops. I zoomed in accidentally. And he pointed out that, what's with the violence. And it kind of made me think. I'm just carrying on this, thing that I'd picked up in Herge, where guys were getting hit over the head with not kiris, with pipes and whatever, and shot at, and there was always this implied threat of violence or open violence. So to get any of this across the line today, I would actually take a lot of that out. And to be honest with you, it's hard to do because these are adventure stories. So a lot of, if you don't have the tension built in, and a lot of the tension is implied by somebody getting out of a sticky situation, then it's actually half the story is gone. I apologize for the dog. I had to lock him out here just to do this, and I think he's very unhappy. I might have to cut it short here to go and give him a bone or something, appease him. But that was a run through some of the work I've done, and I'll go into this violence thing in a separate. I don't think this is a place for it, but I'll do a separate video about that, because the movies I'm making now, I don't. Okay, I really got to go and appease this dog. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I'll cover the violence thing at a later stage. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed seeing some of my work over the past, 35 years. And I will make a separate video about the violence issue and my thoughts about it and where it's taken me. Great. Thanks very much for joining my channel. Thanks once again for dropping in. And I hope I'll see you around here again soon. All the best. Bye.